Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I am Mateo311 and this is your channel for everything VR related. Today, we'll be discussing the craziest complaints I've heard about some of the best VR games out there. Now I know the internet is full of trolls, but we're going way beyond that today. These are people with outlandish opinions or expectations, and in many cases, these people are just wildly misinformed about how game production and the overall VR industry works. So we'll get into all of that. Hopefully this will be an entertaining and also educational video. People can walk away having a better understanding of why certain games work the way they do. Now there are of course links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead, but before we jump in, this video is brought to you by another great game that also doesn't suck. Sky Strikers is a free-to-play 3v3 competitive sports title that feels like a mix between Rocket League and Gorilla Tag. This physically demanding title allows you to choose from 3 different robotic chassis, all with their own specific pros and cons. You can immediately jump into some casual games, or there's a ranked mode for the more competitive amongst us, and there's even a social hub for up to 10 players filled with different mini-games. Again, Sky Strikers is currently available free-to-play on MetaQuest headsets, and if you want to check it out for yourself, there's a link down in the description. Okay, let's get into this, guys. Now, you honestly would not believe how many times someone tried to convince me that Half-Life Alyx, Asgard's Wrath 2, and now the latest is Batman Arkham Shadow just are not good games. It's one thing for them not to be your style, but it's a very different thing for them to be objectively bad titles. So that's what I want to start with. What makes a game actually bad? Now this aspect should not be up for debate. Things such as bugs, poor performance, a lack of overall value, and a missing player base if this happens to be an online multiplayer game. Those are the 100% non-controversial items. If a title suffers from those issues, the players have a genuine right to complain. Now from here we start to move into some more subjective aspects, but I think most people will agree there's a difference between a game being stylized and just having really crappy graphics or audio. And the last aspect that'll definitely make or break a game is the mechanics. Honestly, if a game has really good mechanics and most people find it fun, the average player is willing to forgive most of those issues I talked about. Because listen, that's what games are there for. You want to have a good time. So you could overlook crappy graphics, not great audio, as long as you're having really fun. And I always like the example of something like chess. Chess doesn't have good graphics. It's just a fantastic game to play. It's strategic, it sucks you in, and you can play it time and time again. So that's what games are about. So if you're screwing up these criterias, yeah, anyone can complain about your game. But from then on, everything else is subjective. So the question remains, how the hell can someone say a game like Half-Life Alyx sucks? There's a couple pretty unique reasons how people can convince themselves that a top quality game sucks. And it usually comes down to a bunch of different things. One, sometimes people are just annoyed at the hype. They keep hearing a game so great, so great, so great, it didn't connect with them, so it sucks. And that happens, I see that all the time. I see that, specifically with Asgard's Wrath 2. I love the game. I've spent 100 hours in it. It's just fantastic for me. But for some people who heard it's amazing 10 out of 10 and they played it and they're like, I'm not enjoying this. For them, it sucks. Totally get that. Now, there's the other issue where they have people who's like the one problem person. And I don't mean they're the problem. They find one problem with the game and they get stuck on it. Like, I've heard recently for Batman Arkham Shadow, well, you can't physically pick up everything in the world. You can't pick up the bat when someone drops it. Or you just can't grab everything. That's just not what a VR game's all about. Immersion's broken. This is terrible. How can anyone like this game? Yes, people do get stuck on one single issue. I see it all the time. Another recent example for Batman is, well, how could this be a top quality game if it doesn't have the best VR graphics I've ever seen? Half-Life Alyx came out in 2019 and it looks way better. Yes, it objectively does look better, but how could you be willing to throw out everything else the game offers just because of that one comparison? Now there is a complaint that I could understand a bit more, but I still don't agree with, and that's the overall value of a game. And I constantly hear, $50 for a 10-hour game? Are you kidding me? Absolutely not. Now in retrospect, the studio probably had 100 people working on a game for 3 years, spent millions on the title, and you're like, nah, it's not worth 50. But I will buy a DLC pony for 20 bucks. That's the world we're living in. And I much rather pay 50 bucks for 10 hours of beautifully crafted storytelling, graphics, like something that people poured their heart and soul into and tried to give you a magical moment throughout those whole 10 hours. Then the repetitive, crappy, grindy, addictive nonsense that we get now. Like, kids are so used to just jumping in a free-to-play game and spending 1,000 hours in it and then complaining that it wasn't worth their time or whatever the case may be. But that wasn't a fun, entertaining game. That was just like a grindy addiction. And I hate that's where the industry is at. And yet they'll also spend their money on the most ridiculous DLC stuff. So I get frustrated when I hear, $40 or $50 for a 10-hour game. You can play that game over 100 times if you enjoyed it. You could find all the little secrets in there. Honestly, I think Batman's got a good 40 hours of content if you're a completionist, you want to do it on the hardest level, you want to do all the challenges, and you want to come back and really experience it. Any good game should be played through from beginning to end more than once. This incessant new age need for more and more content leads to everything just being bland. I think the perfect comparison would be a handcrafted, marvelous painting. It can take hundreds of hours to produce one small image. But at the same time, we could ask AI to pump out thousands of images, but they're all going to feel samey and soulless. Now, I will say value can be objective. Some people just want new stuff, even if it is generic, and they don't want to replay content. But if you love and appreciate something, you really should give it at least a second look through. So this is one that always hurts my soul. I constantly hear this or, see it in the comments, whatever game it may be. I'm not spending $30, or people say no VR game is worth more than $30, or 10 hours for $40. These really drive me nuts. You have no idea how much time and effort went into the most minute aspects of that game. And you're not willing to, spend $40 for, it's only 10 hours. You go to the movies for, 2 hours and that's $20. I don't get it. It's really crazy. And you could do this over and over again, unlike a movie. And I would say in most cases, these blockbuster video games give us a better experience than going to the movie theater. And this leads us right into expectations. I've spoken about the comparison to flat screen many times before, but it's worth mentioning again here because it's absolutely a contributing factor. Flat screen games have been around for 40 plus years, and they started off ridiculously trivial with horrible graphics. It took decades for the hardware to get better and the player base to build up. And now finally we have a new medium that rivals the movie industry. Unfortunately though, VR is not there yet, and people are taking their flat screen expectations into VR. They're like, hey, this doesn't compare to God of War or Halo or whatever the case may be. Well, yeah, the player base is a lot smaller, and so is the amount of money in VR. There's also a bunch of other complexities that make VR development a lot harder. So you gotta understand, we're in the infancy stage, but we are growing. It's actually really impressive to see what we've managed to get in VR these days on mobile hardware. You have a headset that transports you to a different world and you embody Batman. It is absolutely crazy. But the expectations of value and blockbuster quality and everything else are just, off the charts these days. They've been getting bigger and bigger for years. Games have ballooned up to $250 million development costs. It's insane. And VR is not there. So I can understand people being underwhelmed with what VR delivers. I mean, they're comparing $20 million games up against $200 million games. But that's like saying every single lower budget movie is absolutely terrible. That's just not the case. Now, there's also another level that people take this train of thought to, and it drives me absolutely insane. That's where they go, every single VR game is just a cash grab. Every game's a cash grab. This isn't worth $10, maybe $5 I'd pay for it. The insanity is just crazy. Like, they can't see any merit in something that's not over the top blockbuster or that they can't play for 3 billion hours, even though they complain that Asgard's Wrath 2 is too long. You cannot win with these people. But that's the one that drives me nuts, because at this point, I know a lot of these studios. I know a lot of these developers. I know how hard they're working, the amount of time and effort that's put in for minor things, like how a door opens, like little crazy things. Just the feel of mechanics and weapons and stuff like that. That stuff is really hard. And they put so much work into the tiniest things. And people are like, cash grab. It's all a cash grab. Overall, the level of ignorance on these comments is just staggering. Almost every VR game is working under an extremely tight budget. The studios that have lasted a long time know the right corners to cut and just generally end up putting more love, commitment, and extended support into their titles than we see in the flat screen world. But probably the complaint that gets to me the most is these people that are just so stuck on their console or their platform and anything else sucks. Like, I've seen people saying, I want Batman to fail because it's on Quest. Meanwhile, Quest is holding up the entire VR industry. I get it. PCVR and PlayStation VR2 has way better graphics. I would never deny that. You can't deny that. But that's not where the sales are. That's not where the developers make their money. And this is a meta-funded title, Batman. So it's going to be on the Quest 3. It's going to be exclusive. Just deal with it. So many people haven't even played the game and they're like, well, I seen a trailer and the combat looks like crap and the graphics aren't Half-Life Alyx and it must be terrible. Those people are happy to be willfully ignorant and just want to fanboy their specific platform. And I'm pointing fingers at everyone here. For the longest time, the response that every Quester had was, well, it's wireless. Yeah, but on Quest 1 and Quest 2, games look like dog shit. Only now is the Quest 3 getting to a respectable level. All of VR is filled with pros and cons. Everybody needs to stop bitching and just be one big happy VR family. I know I pick on the PlayStation VR2 at times, but I don't do this out of malice. I just call things like I see them. When developers are telling me, listen, we're not making any money on PlayStation VR2, looks like Sony's gonna abandon it, I just let you know that information. I'm not picking on the PlayStation VR2. I want it to be extremely successful. I want to see a lot of big games like Horizon Call of the Mountain. I love that game. That's another one we could talk about that people ripped on too. I can't play it. The reprojection is terrible. Yeah, reprojection was terrible in that game. Still loved it. It's one issue. Big deal. Move on. So everybody, just relax a little bit. Enjoy what you enjoy. Stop bitching and moaning. The trolls can keep trolling, but everybody else, be happy. Enjoy VR, whatever platform you're on. And if you like this video, go ahead, give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. And as always, I'll see you guys on next time.